You, as Secretary of State, and in other elements of your political career, including being a senator from here in New York, you've had lots of contact with leaders around the world. Mr. Trump, as the Republican frontrunner, is obviously having some success with Republican voters. He really is way ahead of the field. He does look like he's likely to get the nomination. Whatever he's offering, it is playing in our country to a certain degree with the Republican electorate. How do you imagine it will play with world leaders?
Well, we already know that because we can see public comments from world leaders, and we also have a lot of evidence from private communications that I and others have received asking, what is going on? What does this mean? Just take two of the points that he has made. One around terrorism and barring all Muslims from coming to the United States. We know if we're going to defeat ISIS, which is a very high priority for us, for our partners in Europe and the Middle East, especially Israel and others, we have to form coalitions with predominantly Muslim nations. I know how hard it is to form a coalition. I formed the coalition that imposed the sanctions on Iran, got Russia and China and others to be part of it. You don't form a coalition by starting with insulting the religion of the people in the countries you're trying to get into the coalition. And then when he turns his back on NATO, the most successful defense alliance in history, which has to be a part of our effort to defeat ISIS and to stop terrorist attacks in Europe and elsewhere, it doesn't show that he's strong. It shows that he is dangerously wrong. He's in over his head. This idea he's been putting out recently that we should withdraw from the Pacific. So we're no longer a Pacific power. We're no longer fulfilling our treaty obligations to Japan, South Korea, and others. In fact, off the cuff, he said, let them have nuclear weapons. So we'd have an arms race under his theory, not just in the Middle East, but also in Asia. I have no idea what that means other than it scares me, and it scares a lot of thoughtful leaders around the world. The United States has kept the peace. We have created the conditions for global prosperity. We now have to up our game economically so that more Americans benefit from that global prosperity, and I have the plans, I think, that will deliver on that. But if we withdraw from the world, if we, in a sense, build a wall around the United States, we will pay a big price. And I think if he decides to continue with that sort of foreign policy, national security ad-libbing, it's going to cause a lot of serious questioning among our friends and allies that could have unfortunate consequences for our policies.
The criticism that he has raised about NATO, which you were just discussing there, is obviously raising eyebrows not just around the world but also here at home. It's seen as a very, very radical proposal that we would turn our back on NATO. But there is an element of his criticism which I think is not seen as extreme, and there is widespread concern about, and that's the fact that NATO countries, less than a fifth of them, are spending what they are supposedly obligated to spend on defense. And this is a mutual defense pact. We count on our allies to be holding up their end of the bargain on this. He's complaining that we're basically carrying other countries' weight in NATO and that other countries aren't keeping up with us. Isn't there something to that part of the criticism?
Well, I think it's fair to say that we do want the countries that are partners in NATO with us to fulfill their obligations. And we will continue to push that. Some countries, as you said, have really stepped up in the last few years to do that, and we want more to step up. But we have to look at what it means to have defense. We have to modernize NATO. What kind of alliance will NATO be? How does it protect from the non-state threat of terrorism? We've always been an alliance primarily focused on Russia and aggression, then moving our eyes toward Iran and the potential of nuclear weapons and the like. We have to take a 360-degree look about how NATO is going to help improve the defense and security of our European partners. But I would still argue, while we're in that process to get them to do more for themselves and to change some of their laws so they can be better partners with us, particularly on sharing information across their own borders and with the United States when it comes to potential terrorist activity, I again, don't think you accomplish that by holding this threat over their heads where you act like you are totally oblivious to the fact that Russia is probing the boundaries of the Baltic states, for example. You don't, I think, get what you need out of NATO countries, all of them, including the smallest ones, by acting as though you could walk away from it. That could lead to the politicians and the forces within, let's say, the Baltic countries, who are favorable toward Russia, like Russian-speaking populations, to say to their fellow leaders, hey, you know what, the U.S. is out of here. We better start making accommodations with Russia. This all is a very complex set of circumstances that I don't think he even has studied or cares to understand. And so, you know, from my perspective, I'm willing and anxious to take him on this broad range of foreign policy and security issues.
Do you think that he's manifestly unqualified to be running for president, given what you just described as his approach to foreign affairs? Secretary Clinton answers that manifestly unqualified question, and not in the way you think she might, right after this break. We'll be right back.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.